birthday to you. Happy birthday to you.
You're tuned in to Cineversary, a podcast that celebrates a milestone anniversary of a masterful work of cinema. Each month we send happy birthday wishes to a different film currently observing a joyous jubilee, anything from a 20th to a 100th anniversary. This, as ever, is your faithful host. I'm Eric Martin, creator of the Cineverse blog and moderator of the weekly Cineverse film discussion group. Well, they don't call them picture shows anymore, but they did back in the 1950s and, for that matter, 1971, the year that put Peter Bogdanovich on the map with his third feature film, The Last Picture Show, which was released 50 years ago this October. Joining me in commemorating this milestone, I've got a return guest. It's Barna Donovan, film professor at St. Peter's University and author of several books on the cinema. Now, you may remember Barna as my co-pilot on an episode from about 2 years ago, in which we honored another 50th anniversary for Easy Rider. Barna and I are prepared to jump in the old pickup truck, take a trek to the Lone Star State circa 1951, and revisit the stomping grounds of Sonny, Dwayne, JC, and Sam the Lion as we explore what makes The Last Picture Show so memorable. Before that, however, we need to fuel up for our excursion by learning more about when, where, how, and why this movie was made, compliments of Wikipedia. The Last Picture Show is a 1971 American coming-of-age drama film directed and co-written by Peter Bogdanovich, adapted from the semi-autobiographical 1966 novel The Last Picture Show by Larry McMurtry. The film stars an ensemble cast that includes Timothy Bottoms, Jeff Bridges, Ellen Burstyn, Ben Johnson, Cloris Leachman, and Sybil Shepherd. Set in a small town in North Texas from November 1951 to October 1952, it tells the story of two high school seniors and longtime friends, Sonny Crawford and Dwayne Jackson, played respectively by Bottoms and Bridges. Now, at the time, Bogdanovich was a 31-year-old stage actor, film essayist, and critic with two small films to his credit, Targets and Voyage to the Planet of Prehistoric Women. Now, he had also helmed a documentary called Directed by John Ford. The first of these, Targets, was made with his wife and collaborator, Polly Platt. As Bogdanovich said in a conversation with The Hollywood Reporter, while waiting in a cashier's line in a drugstore, he happened to look at the rack of paperbacks, and his eye fell on an interesting title there, The Last Picture Show. The back of the book said it was about kids growing up in Texas, so Bogdanovich decided it didn't interest him, and he put it back on the shelf. A few weeks later, actor Sal Mineo handed Polly Platt a copy of the book. "I always wanted to be in this," Mineo had said, "but I'm a little too old now," so he recommended that Platt and Bogdanovich make this into a film. According to Bogdanovich's recollection, Platt said, "I don't know how you make it into a picture, but it's a good book." Bogdanovich, McMurtry, and Platt ended up adapting the novel into the film of the same name. Okay, so Stephen Friedman was a lawyer with Columbia Pictures, but he was keen to break into film production as he had bought the film rights to the book, so Bogdanovich ended up hiring him as producer. After discussing the movie project with Orson Welles, his house guest at the time, Bogdanovich decided, for aesthetic reasons, to shoot The Last Picture Show in black and white, which was pretty unusual for the time. The film was shot in Larry McMurtry's small hometown of Archer City, located in northern Texas. McMurtry had renamed the town Talia in his book. Bogdanovich renamed it Honorine, a ghost town 8 miles south of Archer City, for the film. This name was chosen to correspond to the cow town of Abilene, Kansas, in Howard Hawks' Red River from 1948. Red River, significantly, is the movie, indeed, The Last Picture Show, that Dwayne and Sonny watch at the end of the movie. The Last Picture Show was theatrically released on October 22, 1971 by Columbia Pictures. It was a critical and commercial success, grossing $29 million on a $1.3 million budget, and was nominated for 8 Academy Awards, including Best Picture, Best Director, Best Supporting Actor for Johnson and Bridges, and Best Supporting Actress for Burstyn and Leachman, with Johnson and Leachman eventually winning. In 1973, largely because of the skinny dipping party scene, the film was banned in Phoenix, Arizona, where the city attorney notified a drive-in theater manager that the film violated a state obscenity statute. Eventually, a federal court decided that the film was not obscene. Ed Ware, the district attorney of Rapides Parish, Louisiana, managed to block the showing of the film, but only temporarily because the theater filed suit successfully to overturn Ware's directive. In 1998, the Library of Congress selected the film for preservation in the United States National Film Registry. In 2007, The Last Picture Show was ranked number 95 on the American Film Institute's 10th anniversary edition of the 100 Greatest American Films of All Time. Today, The Last Picture Show commands a perfect 100% fresh score on Rotten Tomatoes, earning an average critical rating of 9 out of 10. Take a moment with me and immerse yourself in the film's original trailer.
Doubtful mind and melt your cold, cold heart.
Tony Bennett's Cold, Cold Heart was on everybody's hit parade. Elizabeth Taylor was getting married. Boys wore ducktails. The police action in the Far East was Korea. And Anarene, Texas, like other small towns, is approaching the end of an era.
I heard about the ball game last night. 121-14. Must be pretty near record.
What you think he'd do if he found us?
Shoot us, probably.
But, Mama, it's a sin, isn't it? Unless you're married, you know I wouldn't do that.
Don't be so mealy-mouthed.
Tough it out, tough it out. You gotta be men like the rest of them. Ain't none of you pretty enough to be women.
You boys can get on out of here. I don't want to have no more to do with you. I've been around that trashy behavior all my life. I'm getting tired of putting up with it.
Oh, quit prison. I don't think you did it right anyway.
Just remember when a dream
Honey?
What?
you belong to me.
That's a lie.
I'll stay with her all night one of these nights, too. She done promised.
You won't either.
Yes, I will. Why shouldn't I?
I'm not sorry for you. You'd have left Billy, too, just like you left me. I bet you left him plenty of nights, whenever J.C. whistled.
So long, buddy.
So long, Dwayne. Be careful. I'll take care of the mercury for you.
I'll see you in a year or two if I don't get shot.
You wouldn't believe how this country's changed. I reckon the reason why I always drag you out here is probably I'm just as sentimental as the next fella when it comes to old times. Old times.
Anarene, Texas, 1951. Nothing much has changed.
Your cold, cold heart.
All right, if you've been with us on previous anniversary journeys, yeah, you know the drill. I'm about to tell you that Barna and I will be engaging in some serious spoiler-filled talk that may divulge key plot points. In keeping with this movie's adult situations, we'll also be examining and talking about the sexual content in The Last Picture Show. So be forewarned that, while our exchange will be profanity-free, there's grown-up gab ahead intended for mature audiences.
To familiarize you with the movie rating symbols which will be used by this theater, we present the following guide for parents and young people. R, restricted. Under 17 requires accompanying parent or adult guardian.
All set? Let's dim the house lights and welcome Barna Donovan to the stage. I'm thrilled to bring back to our show a guest who actually joined us 2 years ago for episode number 12. Now that's when we commemorated the 50th anniversary of Easy Rider. It's Barna Donovan, film professor at St. Peter's University in Jersey City, New Jersey, and author of several books on the cinema, including Blood, Guns, and Testosterone, Action Films, Audiences, and a Thirst for Violence, and Conspiracy Films, A Tour of Dark Places in the American Conscious. Barna, welcome back to Cineversary.
It's great being back. Thanks a lot for the invitation.
Absolutely. Always a pleasure talking to an expert like you, someone passionate about movies. And yes, you were such a fantastic guest before. I thought, I've got to find an opportunity to get Barna back here. And what better opportunity than to talk about Peter Bogdanovich's The Last Picture Show? But it's yet another sign that we're all getting a little longer in the tooth, Barna, when you consider that this movie is marking a 50th anniversary later this year. And that makes this an opportune moment to explore why The Last Picture Show is so cherished and significant. Now, so are you ready, Barna, to revisit the Royal Theater, to turn that dusty old projector on, and examine The Last Picture Show at least one last time with me?
Oh, I absolutely. I love this movie. This is a movie I want to be revisiting in viewings in the future too. So absolutely, it's great to talk about it.
Fantastic. Do you ever show or discuss this movie with your class?
Yes, when we're looking at films from that period in a general film history course.
Okay, gotcha. So let's get into it then, Barna. So when and where did you first see The Last Picture Show, and why and how is this movie important to you in any way?
Well, I think this was about roughly maybe 20 years ago or so when I first saw it. I had been fascinated by it and reading a lot of things about the so-called New Hollywood and films that came forth at the tail end in the late 1960s as the traditional studio system and its style of filmmaking was going into decline. So you had the rise of the New Hollywood, new filmmakers, and then what they were doing, before the film industry got to Star Wars, and we had the whole new era of the blockbusters that we're still living in. So there was this fascinating period with very personal filmmaking, really experimental, outside of the box thinking filmmaking from a group of directors. And I was trying to watch films of the era, just immerse myself in late 60s, 70s films. And actually, the first Peter Bogdanovich film that I saw was Nickelodeon, because I was interested in a film telling of the early days of the film business and what the plot is dealing with there about the battle between the trust and independent filmmakers. And I thought that it's just not a very good film, but I thought, okay, let me go back and revisit his work from the beginning, and that's when I watched The Last Picture Show, which I enjoyed very, very much.
Yeah, did it have an immediate impact, or did it have to kind of sink in for a while?
It made an immediate impact because it was very obvious how it fits into that era of filmmaking where the filmmakers were challenging conventions, being experimental. So that was very obvious, but it was so interesting that it's not a film where it's going and trying to tear down the past, but rather it's looking at how you have this passage of one era of one period in American history, American culture, and the emergence of a new one. So it was this wonderful film in these areas of shades of gray, and ironically, it's a black and white movie too, but sure. in shades of gray about what it says about the past and the passage of the past, the abandonment of old values, and so it criticizes things to an extent, but also celebrates things that are just so wonderfully complex that I just really appreciated that.
I was racking my brain because, in all honesty, I don't remember exactly when I first viewed The Last Picture Show. I know it wasn't a broadcast television or cable viewing thing. I think I literally took a chance on renting this movie on VHS based on its strong reputation. And because I fancied myself as a self-respecting cinephile who, of course, had a lot of catching up to do back in my younger days, I know it made an immediate strong impression on me as well because I ended up buying its first incarnation on DVD and upgrading it across DVD and Blu-ray at least twice. So yeah, it has stuck with me, no question. And today I rank it as one of the very finest films of the 1970s, such a golden period in filmmaking for me anyway. I definitely consider it his best work, Peter Bogdanovich's. and a stunning movie filled with emotional complexity and thematic brilliance. It's definitely up there for me. So why is this film worth celebrating for all of us, for that matter, all these years later, Barna? Why does The Last Picture Show still matter, and how has it stood the test of time? What would you say?
Well, I think that this is an important film to celebrate in terms of really appreciating the art of making a movie that is setting out to test and push the boundaries of storytelling. How to tell stories without the really traditional, really obvious formulas. Because it really that was the appeal of a lot of filmmaking in that era. And a little bit of the backstory of how the film got to be made. It was produced by the same producers, Bert Schneider and Bob Rafelson, who did Easy Rider. And when they hired Bogdanovich, they told him, look, Peter, go and do your own thing. Go and break the rules, test the boundaries. And this is a really fascinating film to see something like that being pulled off, so effectively. You're watching the film and you're not recognizing, when you have the novice filmmakers or storytellers sitting down and reading the Sid Field paradigm, where you go and study the plot points and what has to happen by this page and by that page. You're not recognizing this. It has that it has that episodic quality of real life, that you're not watching something coming out of a typewriter, but this is a very compelling recording of real lives, of compelling, realistic people, maybe people that you might not want to be like. You don't want to make some of the same choices they do, but they're just so compelling.
Yes. No, that's well put. Totally agree. I think it still matters because it endures as a fascinating time capsule of a specific time and place, a small town in Texas between 1951 and 1952. Roughly a year passes. And The Last Picture Show stands as both a work of timeless Americana while also feeling like an elegy and farewell to an epic in our nation's history, now forgotten by many, an age that had its good and bad points, right? Yeah. It's interesting because many Americans thought of the years following World War II, particularly the decade of the 50s, as a kind of golden age, one filled with greater prosperity, more creature comforts, pop culture excitement with the coming of rock and roll and the increasing popularity of television. But the way that Bogdanovich and company portray this culture is through a lens of loneliness and disaffection, heartbreak, impermanence. It's hard for viewers to believe that lives and relationships in Anarene, Texas are going to progress and prosper. Those who choose to remain in this town are likely going to begin to fade from relevance in history like Sam's Movie House did. I'll read you something from Roger Ebert's assessment of this film in his review. He said that the film is all about an evocation of mood. It is about a town with no reason to exist and people with no reason to live there. The only hope is in transgression, as Ruth knows when she seduces Sonny, the boy half her age, unquote. Barna, I think it's also stood the test of time thanks to its impeccable design and aesthetic realism. You were talking about how real the movie feels. The littlest details, they feel so period authentic, from the country music and television programs that were popular at the time to the clothes, the hairstyles, the colloquialisms, the mannerisms of the townsfolk. And consequently, I think we believe that life in a small town in the early 50s is depicted accurately. The ennui, the mundanity, the close-knit nature of the community, as well as the simple pleasures that the townsfolk pursue. And it's this level of honesty, as well as the film's sexual frankness, that continue to make it relevant today, at least for me. So The Last Picture Show remains believable by virtue of its fine performances, its fantastic script and quality dialogue, its attention-getting and slightly shocking in the carnality department, and it's also thought-provoking in its themes and messages. So all of these things add up to a fantastic experience that continues to resonate. So in what ways do you think The Last Picture Show is influential on movies and popular culture in any way, or perhaps set some trends? Can you identify anything here?
Actually, one of the points that you touched on, I think it's very important because this is where you really can see the influence of this film, the carnality and this very frank look at teen sexuality
Yes.
with the high school kids experimenting. First time they're becoming romantically involved. They're trying to become sexually involved. It shows it so matter-of-factly, so realistically,
Yes.
where you see the sex scenes or the attempts at getting to sex. It just looks so really, it doesn't look romantic, doesn't look Hollywood, or it doesn't look
No.
soap opera. It has that clumsy and self-conscious feeling of young sex.
You're so right.
And
Yep.
all the
Yep.
little rules that's so interesting, like the one of the first scenes with Sonny, where he's trying to go all the way or as far as he can with his girlfriend in the car, and there are these little rules. That's okay if she goes and takes her bra off, and he's fondling her breasts, but when he's trying to reach under her skirt, now that's crossing a line there. So it's looking at these little rules of the of sexual relations, and it presents it honestly right in your face. So that kind of frank look at teen sexuality is very influential. I mean, later on you're going to have teen sexuality and all kinds of really goofy comedies, Porky.
Yeah, it launches a whole subgenre of the teen sex comedy film, right?
Sure. but here it's realistic. It's
Yes.
just matter of fact.
No question. Yeah, that's certainly, you could draw kind of a through line. This movie kind of ushering in a new era where you could be sexually honest and frank and forthright. And it can present the awkwardness of teenage sexuality and the coming of age kind of transition that isn't always the most elegant, intimacy.
Right.
So no question about that. I can't draw necessarily a straight line from this to a movie that came later per se, but you could tell it's like he's mining new territory here. That was controversial, let's face it, because from what I understand, this movie was banned in some communities. I don't know if it was edited or shortened or truncated, but yeah, I mean, it did get some notoriety in the press for the depiction of sexuality, right?
Right. As I understand, I think it was banned for a while in Phoenix, I believe.
That's what I saw as well. Yeah. So again, I'm no historian. I don't have more details, but all you need to know is Bogdanovich and company, they are pushing the envelope here, and it's not to everybody's taste. It probably would have been a bit in your face for the early 70s, but again, this is the new Hollywood in which suddenly the old production code is out the window. We have a rating system. This is an adult movie, an R-rated movie. And yes, you're going to be exposed to some adult situations, some nudity, some maybe uncomfortable sexuality and dialogue about it. So I think all the filmmakers involved deserve credit for that, because again, it's films like this that make it easier for subsequent filmmakers to be able to tell honest stories. Would you agree?
Sure, absolutely, and also in terms of the influence, I find this interesting too. That even though it fits so well into the zeitgeist of the early '70s, this idea that you're going to interrogate traditions, that the film is not a period film, like we were saying. It's actually set in 1951. So it's about a generation before, and afterwards, you're also going to see in the '70s a series of these nostalgia films, period films,
yes.
like with Nickelodeon, with Bogdanovich himself, and going back to the early days of the film business, or with Paper Moon, that's set during the Depression, or American Graffiti that George Lucas is later going to do, where it's looking at 50s teen culture. So it's interesting in 70s audience tastes that on the one hand they are open to the breaking of rules, to rewriting of rules, but there's also a sense of nostalgia for the past. I mean, some of them will be very nostalgic, say like an American Graffiti, or on television, where in a way it's inspiring Happy Days, that innocent look at 50s America, and then you have a much grittier, much more critical look at the at the era with the Last Picture Show.
I wanted to touch on what you just said. I totally agree. Now, this helped kick off the retro craze for 1950s culture in the 1970s. You were already hitting on some of these cylinders, but I call this decades displaced nostalgia.
Mm-hmm.
It's the phenomena where suddenly there's a wistfulness for something that happened like 20 years earlier, and it happened in the 80s for the 60s and the 90s for the 70s, but in the 1970s it happened for the 1950s. So you think about how many popular works that were released in the 70s that harkened back 2 decades earlier, or, as you said, the previous generation. Films like The Lords of Flatbush, Grease,
Right.
American Graffiti, TV shows like you said, Happy Days, Laverne and Shirley, even like the Sha Na Na variety show. Now, these aren't a lot of examples, but I think where there's smoke, there's fire. There is an interesting kind of phenomenon like that going on. So I'm not saying Last Picture Show lit this fire, but it's within that wheelhouse, right? It's summoning up a kind of a nostalgia for something in the 50s or the earlier generation. So that's kind of an interesting phenomena going on there. I also would just say, in answer to this question about how the movie was influential on cinema, set trends, bear with me here because I'm going to kind of set the stage, and that is that Bogdanovich was part of the breed of up-and-coming new Hollywood filmmakers like your Martin Scorsese's, like your Francis Ford Coppola's, Dennis Hopper, William Friedkin, Robert Altman, Steven Spielberg, etc. And many of these directors strive to make bold, new, modernist statements, tell cinematic stories in daring new ways, and deviate from classic Hollywood filmmaking, right? Bogdanovich, however, it was interesting because he's more of a neoclassicist, steeped in the tradition of old Hollywood masters like John Ford and Howard Hawks and Orson Welles. And he pays homage to all three of these directors in various ways. You think of how he uses Howard Hawks' film Red River as the actual Last Picture Show feature. And he casts John Ford stock company actor Ben Johnson, known for appearing in many westerns, in a key role. He cuts efficiently within the camera, as John Ford did. That means basically filming shots and sequences to make editing easy. And he reintroduces each character and corresponding actor right before the end credits roll, if you recall,
Right.
just like Citizen Kane does.
Uh-huh.
And if you think about how he includes a thematically important monologue that evokes an important memory, and I'm talking about Sam the Lion's recollection at the fishing hole, which recalls the Bernstein monologue in Kane, in which a memory of a beautiful woman with a parasol is recalled. Do you remember that scene in Citizen Kane?
Right, yes.
Yeah. So again, Bogdanovich is kind of paying homage to the past and the directors that influenced him. And in keeping, I think the Last Picture Show is more of a melancholy and nostalgic piece, a period movie that looks back instead of looking ahead or exploring modern-day themes that would have perhaps been more relevant in the early 70s when the picture was released. It's considered a cousin to Orson Welles' The Magnificent Ambersons in that, like Welles' film, a community and its way of life is transformed due to emerging technology, and in this case, it's the advent of television, it's the increasing emergence of highways that could serve as swift escape routes out of town. But still, like you were talking about, despite being this neoclassicist steeped in the past, Bogdanovich does push the envelope. He does defy expectations. For instance, he took Orson Welles' advice and shot the movie in black and white. Now, that was a rarity for an early 70s film. Secondly, as we were discussing, the film is so candid in its sexuality and its dialogue. It features oodles of aberrant sexuality. You think teenage promiscuity, adultery, hint of homosexuality, pedophilia. It's not just, cutesy teenage sex. Like, there's some deviant or aberrant sexuality going on around the corners here, too. And then you think about, Barna, how the Last Picture Show uses popular country music of the period as its soundtrack. It's diegetic music that sometimes comments on the characters and situations. So there's no proper soundtrack written for the film. That's interesting. That's something that, again, you have a film like The Graduate where you use a pop music soundtrack primarily. So it's not like it was the first time this had been done, but it was kind of a rarity back then. You have Easy Rider that does the same thing. So it didn't happen all the time, but it's continuing that tradition a little bit. The filmmakers, I think, further deserve credit for indirectly influencing cinema by helping to propel the careers of several then up-and-coming as well as overlooked actors. You think about the cast of this movie.
Right.
It's Jeff Bridges, it's Sybil Shepherd, it's Ellen Burstyn, Cloris Leachman, Eileen Brennan, Randy Quaid. these are heavyweights, some of whom went on to win Oscars or won Oscars here for that matter. Do you agree? I mean, the ensemble cast here, it's one of the best ever assembled, and it's all the more impressive considering how few of these names were known to audiences at the time, right?
Right. That like you said, Ben Johnson is really the only recognizable name from the John Ford movies, and maybe people who are familiar with the Bridges family, with Lloyd Bridges, maybe they might recognize that Jeff Bridges was his son. But yeah, that Sybil Shepherd was discovered by Bogdanovich when he saw her on the cover of a magazine in a supermarket. Or there's a story about it, that one version that actually his wife saw her first and brought the magazine to his attention, which probably she would regret later on because they had an affair while they were making
exactly. Yeah.
But,
no, there are a lot of relationship politics going on behind the scenes here, of course. But not to cast aspersions if you're just focusing on the art, not necessarily the artist. I mean, it is interesting just how he came to assemble this cast of characters and actors, and I mean, it really is an unimpeachable cast. It's so fantastic.
Oh, absolutely! Everybody fits the character so perfectly.
Totally.
And also Timothy Bottoms, who really is the. I mean, you could say that he's the main character. You see most.
Yeah, he probably has more screen time than anybody.
Right. I mean, you see more of a thorough character arc through him as he's really changes, or you hope that he changes.
It's mostly his story. Yes. And what a fantastic performance there. I'd like to talk a little bit more about him. We'll dovetail back a little bit later. He is the unsung hero of the movie, doing a lot of the emotional heavy lifting. But yeah, let's pivot here. I want to ask you, what is the moral of the story? What messages or themes are built into the Last Picture Show? So what could you identify, Barna?
Yeah, I think the at the core of this, the really important story is the coming of age story. And then if you go and dig even deeper, because there've been always coming of age stories, people are still telling coming of age stories. But what is at the core of that? And the core of that is the development of your own moral code. That when you come of age, right, when you go and move from childhood, from high school, because that's what the plot here is, this group of kids in their last year of high school.
Yes.
As they get to that major turning point where you get out of high school and you're no longer a child. Now you're a young adult. So that's the coming of age story, and then the most important thing that you have to deal with at that point when you no longer have all these controls on your life. Your parents aren't telling you as much what to do.
Sure.
Your school, your teachers. Now you're on your own. You have the freedom, but then what kind of a person do you become? What is the personal ethical code that you're going to develop for yourself? That code of how do you behave when no one's there to control you? And you see this this theme in the stories of the various characters, and some of the really important and really impactful scenes where the characters are hit in the face that this is now what you need to decide for yourself. What kind of a human being are you going to be? See, like the scene where those boys really humiliate Billy, the mentally challenged young boy there, by setting him up with this prostitute, and then she punches him in the nose, and it's just a very uncomfortable scene. It's a very humiliating scene for him. And then Sam confronts them about it and saying, how could you do this? And he says that the worst of it all, because his nose started bleeding after he gets punched, you couldn't even wipe off the blood. And he says, from now on, you're not welcome in my pool hall anymore. So it's not a teacher, it's not somebody doling out some kind of a punishment or a parent, but it's still a lesson about what kind of a human being do you become after. So Sonny kind of was feeling bad about that, and he's grappling with that. And then when Sam forgives him soon after, and he's welcome back in the pool hall anymore, you see his movement towards grappling with this about what kind of a human being is he? How does he treat people? And it takes him a long time to learn. And when you see his relationship relationship with Ruth Popper, the coach's wife, that eventually he treats her pretty shabbily too. That when JC is interested in him, that he just drops her and ignores her, and then he comes crawling back to her on the end of the film, and justifiably, she blows up at him and tells him, "How could you do this to me?" That's the theme that I see there. As a young person who's coming of age, how do you form your own moral code? Or some of the people who don't form one, say like JC. I mean, she's interesting and disturbing and frustrating. She's the town heartbreaker, and she does that throughout the entire film. On the end, I mean, she marries Sonny just to get at her parents, and doesn't protest when the parents go on all the marriage, and she disappears. So we don't know, is she ever going to really change and become a better person? So these themes of what you do to find your code, and especially in a place like this dying place, where you get the sense that even its value systems, even its traditions are fading away and dying. So how do you find your moral center?
You articulated that so perfectly, and I just want to kind of riff on what you were saying. I have some other themes of my own I'd like to talk about in a moment too. But yes, when you think about the morality and what kind of a code you're going to adopt, totally agree. And it really starts when you consider Sam the Lion, because he's kind of the moral hub or the moral center of the whole town. And when you consider his relationship with Sonny in particular, Sonny, it's like he doesn't even have a father figure. You see him pass his biological father, and they're just so disenfranchised from each other. They're so alienated and so forth. So, of course, he looks up to Sam, and he's challenged at the end of the movie because there's no more Sam. What kind of a life is he going to live? Well, he stands up for Billy after he's run down and killed in the street, and it's such a moving scene, of course, and he's the voice for the voiceless there. And then he decides to go back to Ruth Popper. He could have taken that first road out of town and never come back, probably like Dwayne, but he comes back, and that shows that there's a moral core to him, that he has to kind of live by the choices he's made, but also try to make things right. But there's ambiguity at the end in terms of, does this relationship with Ruth have a future? Maybe it doesn't. Maybe there's an end point there that's not going to end happily. We don't know. But it's so interesting because, as you said, we follow the character arc primarily of Sonny, and that makes it such a fascinating journey and a fascinating character. So totally agree there.
This theme of just the pointlessness of traditional rituals in a town, that when it's fading away, it really struck me right from the very first scene. And there are a couple of nice ones where it says that's really the sign that a culture is fading away. Not that they're not making as much money or the economy is going down the drain, but that there's just this feeling that there's no point in carrying on any traditions. Like the very first scene where we see Sonny driving into town, and he sees Billy sweeping the street, and there's all this dust being blown back through.
It's such a symbolic act when you think about, okay, we get it. Billy is, developmentally disabled, but it's such a mark of futility. There's no point in sweeping the street, right? It serves as a symbol.
Yeah. And then the first those first bits of dialogue between Sonny and then these older men around him, they're all giving him a hard time about how at the last football game he wasn't doing enough tackling. Even Sam's giving him a hard time.
That's right.
At one point he says something like, "Well, don't you care about school spirit?" And just goes and shrugs, like, "No, why? What's the point of?"
But they also say you just never learned the fundamentals, blocking and tackling, and then that's kind of a loaded line there that I'd like to revisit in a moment too. But yeah, I mean they're getting a lot of grief about how they're not carrying on the tradition of whatever school spirit or playing good sports or what have you. So that's making a comment in a way too.
Right. Any of the old rules that you're told here that you should adhere to because it's
right.
good, because it keeps the culture here together. It really gets you nowhere. And actually, then there's a scene because that really to get home for me, especially someone who teaches in a classroom. I love the scene in where they're sitting in the English class, and the teacher starts out saying, "So what are the chances that I could interest you in Keats? And Dwayne says, absolutely nothing. And the teacher just has this sardonic smile on his face. The actor John Hillerman, who plays him, I guess he's for Generation Xers. He's most famous as Higgins in the original Magnum PI show, but he's also in a couple of other Bogdanovich films. But he can do a sardonic smile, that few other people can. And instead of a scene where you have some angry teacher yelling at them that this is important, or someone's trying to inspire them about the beauty of poetry, he also shrugs and smiles. What is the point of understanding Keats for kids in this dying town like this? So it's just that theme again, that's how a community is going to become obsolete and fall.
I never thought about it that way. That is very insightful. Yeah, I mean, every time I revisit The Last Picture Show, I'm just picking up more and more subtext that is just layered there, waiting to be discovered by viewers who want to care and pay attention. That's great insight. I think one of the major themes, of course, is the need for human connection and compassion and dialogue. And I think Ruth Popper is an excellent example of how unhappy life in this small town can be for its citizens. And Sonny, you think of him as well. They make a perfect pair because they're both so lonely. He's aching for a physical and emotional relationship with a real person who cares about him, right? You contrast that relationship with the relationship he has with JC, and there's the promise of exciting sex, but maybe not so much. Obviously, there's a whole agenda there that someone like Ruth Popper would never foist on Sonny. Again, the need for, human compassion and connection is important. You were talking about this, but the passing of old values and traditions, it's embodied by the transition of a small town in Texas between 1951 and 1952. I think this period chosen is significant because it marked the increasing shift in audience loyalty toward the vapid medium of television and away from movies watched in a theater. It's also the onset of the Korean War and the Cold War. These are conflicts in which cowboys like Sam and the rugged frontier values they used to stand for, suddenly they're anachronisms that don't fit in. So again, a kind of passing of the torch here, a sad elegy, a kind of a period. The fact that the movie depicts the picture show, the movie house is dead and the small screen is blossoming, on the other hand, it tells us that this already insular town, Barna, it's about to get a lot more insular, and its people will become more alienated and withdrawn. The legacy of the boom of television was that small towns and communities started to lose their unique cultures and eventually became more and more homogenized. So you think about the inevitable demise of a close-knit culture or small-town community as embodied in the sudden passing of Sam, who, as I was talking about, serves as the town's moral hub, and, of course, the demise of the movie theater is an extension of that. And consequently, I think you can more easily decipher the message of the film's original poster, which read, Anarene, Texas, 1951. Nothing much has changed. Now, that's an ironic tagline to me because plenty has changed by the end of the film, including the deaths of Sam, Billy, death of the movie house, death of several relationships. And yet the fates of many of these townspeople probably won't change. I never saw Texasville. I never read, beyond what happens, the continuing adventures of these characters. But if you're taking this movie in a vacuum by itself, it's possible Sonny never leaves Anarene, Texas. Maybe that's good for him. Maybe that's not good. But the fates of these townspeople maybe won't change. Of course, a major theme, the younger generation versus the older generation. And really, it's a compare and contrast between, one group like Sonny, JC, and Dwayne versus like Sam, Lois, and Ruth, right? The older generation represents a regretful or trapped or obsolete bunch whose lives and opportunities have passed them by. And despite being more attractive, maybe more hopeful and yearning, the younger breed, to me anyway, seems doomed to repeat the mistakes of the older generation and likely remain stuck in this town or stuck in their own ruts with not much to anticipate or bank their futures on. So it's a very uncertain kind of road ahead for this younger generation. The only true mature adult in the bunch, tell me if you disagree, is Sam the Lion. And the other grown-ups appear to be living arrested developments as kids who never properly matured. I understand that the waitress at the diner, she's full of life lessons, streetwise cred and everything else. But how much of a role model can you be just, working at a corner cafe? And you think about JC's mother. I mean, she gives her daughter pretty practical advice, like, yeah, you know what, sleep around and figure out before you just jump into the altar with somebody. That is pretty good advice, but again, for a 1951 mother to be telling her daughter at this time, go ahead, play the field and use men to your advantage, it sounds very like selfish advice, right? So it's really Sam, the one that stands as that moral beacon. And once he's gone, boy, all bets are off. And then you were talking about that great scene in the English class where they're talking about Keats and, of course, the Ode to a Nightingale, beauty is truth, truth is beauty. This Keats truism resonates in how Sonny, what does he discover? That real beauty is found far beneath the skin in the form of a warm and caring partner like Ruth, not a shallow and selfish looker like Casey. At least you hope that truth has sunk into Sonny a little bit. And then lastly, bear with me, Barney, because I've got one more theme here, and I think that this is another obvious one, but youth is hampered by inexperience and naivete. Characters like Sonny, Dwayne, and JC, they're looking to end their virgin status. They're looking to start living more mature lives like the adults they model from. But the boys' ineptitude as athletes, such as their inability to play football well, I think it serves as a metaphor for their sexual greenness, which older men in the town tease them about, rebuke them for, saying things like, you never learned the fundamentals, tackling and blocking. Again, I think there's a kind of an inside joke there, like, you guys are sexually inexperienced. You don't really know the ways of the world yet, and you're about to find out.
That's a good point. Actually, I did not look at the ribbing there about them not being able to play football well as a sexual metaphor there. But yes, I completely agree.
Yeah, so there's a lot of thematic gold to kind of dig out here in the movie. It's not like we have to rack our brains to think of these things. It's just so thematically rich and well-written and well-realized by Bogdanovich and crew that this is a movie that rewards repeat viewings, as so many of the films do that we explore here in our Cineversary podcast. Let's transition here and talk a little bit about who do you think that The Last Picture Show appealed to initially when it was released in 1971? And who do you think it appeals to today? And if that appeal has changed, Barna, what does that say about the film's impact, influence, and legacy?
I think that you probably had a lot of young viewers, but also older viewers. So this is what would fascinate me, because here is that you had this new Hollywood, so the new hotshot author directors who are going for, they're trying to develop the voice of a new generation. But so definitely I could see younger people watching this, but say fans of Ben Jonson, fans of John Ford, that they know whose films they're coming out of. I think they can both take a lot of things away from this. So for the young viewers, as we said, the themes of sexuality and coming of age and finding your way in the world, that's definitely be striking a chord there. And then for older people, I think it's an interesting film where it shows the passage of an older world and older values, but it's not attacking it. It's not tearing it down. I could see somebody, someone in the 40s and the 50s, 60s, watching this and really liking Sam. And yes, this is the kind of guy that these young people need in their life. Absolutely, when he dies and the values of a previous generation die off. Look at the way that the new world is struggling afterwards. And also, I think something else that's also interesting to look at here is the which maybe this also had a lot to do with who it appealed to then, because I mean the same way I could see this appealing to the two age groups today, but also if you look at class issues a little bit too, because you have this this dusty, decaying town. It looks like a ghost town. When you see the shots of the streets, you're thinking, who lives lives in those buildings? Well, what kind of businesses are there? Well, what are these people doing here? And there are not a lot of people there. But you're told that you have some people who are rich, who are in the or running the oil industry there. So that's where JC, her mother, did a lot of the things that she was doing. But she's of the wealthier class, and
Right.
then you have people like Dwayne and Sonny, who are this dwindling working class. So this is where I could see somebody interested, audiences interested in this sort of power dynamic of the sort of strengths or the privileges that people who are wealthier in a community like that, like, they would be able to weather if Anarene falls apart. That it doesn't matter so much to them, but the ones who really would have it the hardest, have the toughest decisions to make, would be the poorer kids, like Sonny and Dwayne.
Yeah. I want to read you something that a film critic named James Berardinelli wrote. He said that The Last Picture Show is a rare movie that plays differently but equally well to members of separate generations. For those born in the mid-1940s and earlier, this is a nostalgia trip, a journey through memories unearthed in the nether spaces of the mind. For younger viewers, those who came into being after the Second World War, The Last Picture Show is a time capsule of an era that, while not that long ago, is unlike anything that came after. And for me, I'm 52 years old, so I was too young to see this in theaters. I obviously did not grow up in the 50s, of course, but I just find it so riveting, just looking at time capsule pictures of a particular culture, particular place and time. And it makes it timeless to me because it just feels above reproach. It feels above critique in terms of, you have to believe that the period authenticity is spot on here. You have to believe that the filmmakers are passionate, that they're telling an honest story honestly. And so I have to believe that this kind of culture really did exist in a small town in the Southwest in the United States. And that is just so fascinating to me because life in that part of the country probably no longer exists like this, and it never will again. It's having a respect for the past and where we came from as a country, as a culture. It's also a little bit of a sad elegy to something that's gone and lost and forgotten by many. I'm not saying I speak for my generation or younger viewers or whatever, but I think that it's a good sign when you have people who didn't even grow up with a particular movie or introduced to it at a young age or something, who can revisit it and appreciate it for the elements that I'm talking about here. Does that make sense, Barna?
Oh, absolutely. Mm-hmm.
Let's talk about, for that matter, some elements from The Last Picture Show that have aged well versus maybe not aged so well. Are there any wrinkles that show in this movie? Are there any problematic areas that, wow, they could never make this movie now because fill in the blank, for example?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that it aged overall very, very well. That if you show this to a teenager today or to a college student, they can connect with this. So the story of the coming of age, the sexual situations are very, very timely. Now, things that might give filmmakers pause today. I mean, I would think probably the sexuality issue, that maybe suddenly in the times we're suddenly living in as of a couple of years in the Me Too era, and that we become so sensitive about how sex is depicted in films. Now you hear things if you're reading the trade papers of the film industry right after the Harvey Weinstein scandals and these various other scandals, they're saying that you have filmmakers who are basically shying away from doing sexually explicit films. I mean, even serious movies, and not some dopey sex comedy or some teen sex comedy, but that right now American culture is just so nervous about dealing with sexuality. I mean, even though sex still sells in advertising, right? You see this, all kinds of really glamorized and very unrealistic images of sex and innuendo to sell things, to sell objects. But I can see filmmakers being nervous about this.
Especially with the speed and power of social media to quickly bring the hammer down on you if the slightest bit of controversy arises in a movie, right?
Absolutely. That you hear stories like, well, we have to be very careful about what's going on behind the scenes. That they like the pool scene. Did they have sensitivity people? Well, what was happening with the female characters there? Hopefully they weren't mistreated by the men. And this is a fascinating thing that I read, that for Sybil Shepherd, to her credit, and she was, I believe, something like 20 or 21 years old, when she made it, she was aware of this, that's what the industry was like, that she could be mistreated, and from what I read, that she demanded that there would be this would be contractually written in there, that if the set photographer takes any pictures of her, if she agrees to do the nudity, that will never show up in Playboy or some porn magazine.
That's right.
Someplace. So I think that the sexuality, which is so remarkable for its frankness at the time, would probably still create a lot of nervousness in filmmakers today.
Yeah, it's interesting because you need the characters to be sexual. You need to show the sexual candidness. You need to have some nudity to just kind of hammer home the point to viewers. You can only do so much with subtlety. You consider, like, during the production code era of censorship in the 30s, 40s, 50s, and somewhat into the 60s, they couldn't show something like this. They had to be creative and kind of work around the edges to suggest sexuality in adult situations. But suddenly the dam breaks. It's the early 70s, and you have the freedom for which to express what teenage sexuality was all about. Well, you better show what's going on, and not necessarily in a titillating kind of fashion that's just meant to be, prurient content that excites male viewers in the audience. I suppose you could make a case that the filmmakers could have chosen to downplay the sexual attractiveness of JC, and by extension, Sybil Shepherd. For instance, in the sequence where she seduces and surrenders herself to Abilene, the oil rig worker.
Oh yes.
She appears quite comely. I mean, these shots are meant to titillate to some extent. And likewise, the strip scene in the pool, it builds sexual excitement, even though I argue that we feel her awkwardness. She kind of slips on the diving board. It's not like they're showing full frontal nudity. But on the other hand, Barna, I think it's important to show how an attractive character like JC would be coveted by many boys and men of different ages in a small town, and how she learned to use her sexual charms to manipulate men and follow in the footsteps of her mother. So the character calls for an attractive actress. It calls for, there's going to be some skin shown, and there's ways you could do that with more subtlety and so forth, but it all speaks to, like you were saying, I don't think they could make a movie like this the same way, to the same degree today. There are sensitivity issues, and I respect that. But I would hate to think of, if the Last Picture Show had never been made in 1971 and they're getting around to making it today, if they have to, make all kinds of compromises on the situations and the story, it would be a shame to me, because this story needs to be told honestly and fully.
Yeah.
But despite those possible problematic aspects, Barna, I can't cite another example of something in the film that hasn't aged well or doesn't feel plausible or faithful to that era. I think this is practically an unimpeachable movie, and that it's difficult to find faults 50 years later.
Yeah, I agree.
That's a testament to, of course, the stellar work of everyone involved in the writing and production. So kudos to this whole team. It really does age very well. I agree with you.
Again, it's hard to pick on something where you would say that, well, there's a problem with the quality. There's a controversy issue that today might come up, but besides that, this is so perfectly written and shot and performed that really, like you said, it's unimpeachable. I completely agree.
What is this film's greatest gift to viewers, Barna? This is a birthday celebration, 50th anniversary, give or take, of The Last Picture Show. I think its actual release was October 1971, so we're a little early, but close enough. And, of course, birthdays are all about getting presents, except I always contend it's the fans who continue to get the gifts. So Yeah, greatest gift to viewers. What would you say?
I think one of the big ones, as it was with me, even though I watched Nickelodeon first, is Peter Bogdanovich's career. That he made a lot of interesting films, some really great films, some so-so films, some things that are interesting but were not very successful. So after I watched this, I said to myself, I want to see more of his films, and especially what an interesting mixed bag it is that he would go and move from a very gritty slice of life, slice of reality movie like this, to his second major movie, being What's Up, Doc? This goofy screwball comedy. It's like an homage to 30s and 40s
Very
screwball
funny.
comedies.
Yeah,
Yes,
right.
yes. And then after that, probably if somebody told me I can only have only one Peter Bogdanovich movie in my DVD collection, I would fight with them. I said no, I must have Last Picture Show and also Paper Moon. Which is again just a fantastic film.
Yeah, I would agree. I think that's a great 1-2 punch right there.
Yeah, but which he also did in black and white. So just a very good body of work in 1985, where he did Mask with.
That's a great comeback movie. Yeah.
So just a very fascinating body of work just from the director. And in terms of thematics, one more idea that popped into my head that really audiences, especially young audiences, can take away from this is especially when you look at the older characters in there and think about how you are not that different from generations before you. There will be a time when you will feel that your values are becoming obsolete. You have the catchphrase today, "Okay, boomer." And I'm 50. You're 52. We're both in the Generation X category here. So at least the millennials and generation, what are they now? Z. At least they're not picking on us. They're ignoring us.
Right. Somehow we've managed to evade the body blows and sit out on the sidelines. But sooner or later, one generation is going to come after us too. So
probably.
But I get what you're saying, right? I mean, every generation can relate to this movie to some degree. Is that what you're getting at?
Yeah, and I would say that hey, look, you are not the only people who think that you have problems because of what your parents or grandparents did. Everybody does that. So take away, and that should be a gift as a lesson. Think about that. One day, you will be like Sam the lion, that you're trying to impart some pearls of wisdom, but you're near the end.
No, that's well crafted as a very articulate response here, and I can't think of a greater gift, but I have a couple of my own, if you'll bear with me. I think one of the greatest gifts of The Last Picture Show is, of course, its sexual honesty, its forthright approach to depicting matters of carnality, particularly as we talked about teenage sexuality and the awkwardness that can accompany it. I mean, how brave of a movie to really lay it all out for viewers in the way that The Last Picture Show does. Rarely before had a mainstream Hollywood film attempted to so genuinely portray the clumsiness, the embarrassment, the discomfort that can accompany foreplay and intercourse. Except for that scene involving JC and Abilene, arguably, which conveys the excitement and pleasure of deviant sex, albeit one that ends in disillusionment. Besides that scene, every tryst or sexual exchange involves either disappointment, like when Dwayne can't perform with JC in the motel room, or Billy is berated by the town whore Jimmy Sue, or it ends in monotony, such as when Sonny fondles his girlfriend in the truck, or it ends in inelegance, case in point, like the creaky mattress springs in Ruth Popper's bedroom. Or there's perversity, as evidenced by the preacher's son kidnapping the little girl with evil sexual intent. Very, very creepy, of course, in any age, but especially 2021. My hunch is that this film could not be remade the same way today, as I argued before, because, as we said, Hollywood is much more sensitive when it comes to how it depicts sexual situations nowadays. And that's why a feature like The Last Picture Show remains so refreshing and revealing about the imperfect sexual moments experienced during young adulthood. My second greatest gift, it's that range of wonderful performances given by an extraordinary cast with a very deep bench. Now, this could be Cloris Leachman's finest outing. It's certainly Ben Johnson's best work, and arguably Eileen Brennan's too, but you also think of the incredible acting by the unsung Timothy Bottoms, who breaks our hearts near the conclusion when, in tears, he admonishes the insensitive throng with the line of the movie, to me, "He was sweeping, you sons of bitches, he was sweeping." It's almost like that line it reminds me of in Midnight Cowboy. I'm walking here, one that kind of captures the moment for the movie. And then he scoops up Billy's dead body from the street. He delicately lays him down on the sidewalk, and he covers him gingerly with his jacket. And the fact that Bottoms didn't become a bigger star with further memorable parts in important films, that feels very tragic to me. This guy has so much talent. I don't know if he just had bad decisions in terms of the movies he chose, or he just didn't get enough breaks or what have you. But I mean, he's appeared in this and that, and he's been in some comedy things. But boy, Timothy Bottoms really demonstrates here early on. But he was a force to be reckoned with. And you think about Ellen Bernstein, but rarely has she been better in a part that almost seems custom made for her. You were saying earlier about how it seems like everybody is perfectly cast in the roles they're in. I certainly think of like Ellen Bernstein, like she is born to play that part. And then you consider a young Jeff Bridges. He shines as Dwayne. He demonstrates what he was capable of in bigger and more important turns later in his career. Of course, an Oscar winner later, too. So Robert Altman once said that directing is 90% casting, and I think that adage feels appropriate here, Barna. Mm-hmm. Not to diminish the talents of Peter Bogdanovich or his collaborators, but The Last Picture Show, it would have certainly faded to black prematurely with a weaker roster of actors.
Oh, absolutely. Mm-hmm.
So who will be watching, studying, and talking about The Last Picture Show in another 50 years? We'll likely not be here. Hopefully the planet will be, or the human race. But yeah, what does the future hold for this film? What would you predict?
I think that people who are looking to understand the role of mythic American rural culture, that Western culture, in a world that's also critical of the past, or it's able to or wants to take a critical look at the past, at the origins, that the Western origins of a culture, would be very interested in this film, because on the one hand, we especially over the last year or so, we have been re-examining everything about the American identity, about American history, especially its origins, that mythologized Old West. What were some of the flaws, some of the problems, injustices, maybe in the history of our country, which our popular culture, understandably, like all societies, want to celebrate their history, their past. So, how can you go and take a look at and appreciate parts of your past while also taking a critical look at this, which Last Pictures Show does effectively. So I think people are interested in that question. Students of film history and cultural history will be looking at how Last Picture Show accomplishes that sort of balance, that kind of celebration and examination and interrogation of the history and traditions of America. So I think that would be that definitely would be one group, and also I think perhaps aspiring filmmakers, storytellers who are concerned about the nature of audiences and the film industry, and how you see less and less very personal filmmaking, being able to connect with mainstream audiences today. So for them, they I think. And just like I was so interested in this period in film history and American history, who want to ask what was going on in the late '60s, in the early '70s, or throughout the '70s, up to a time where the industry was supporting and encouraging very personal filmmaking, and while at the same time the very personal visions of filmmakers like Peter Bogdanovich, they were also striking a chord with the mainstream. So because we seem to have this this disconnect between the two today. Now you have the kind of films that the critics are all lauding, that the Academy wants to honor, yet audiences don't seem to be connecting with that. What were filmmakers doing in the 70s, where you had this golden age of very personal, very artistic, outside of the box thinking filmmaking going on. So I think aspiring filmmakers and storytellers will be interested in understanding, how come you could have something like a Last Picture Show that's celebrated by the critics and then accepted by audiences, or other films at the time, the things like Godfather 2, A French Connection, which are all very high quality films. They're coming from very personal places of the filmmakers, and then the greater culture is interested in it. So today you either have the personal filmmaking, and then you have a ton of superhero movies and Star Wars and Fast and Furious. So there's this two world of filmmaking. How could the two be connected?
Well, they could always remake this as the last action hero picture show.
Right.
I wouldn't put anything past Hollywood these days, right?
Sure. Just reboot it.
I like your assessment, though. That gives me some hope that future generations, eyeballs maybe yet to be born, are going to feast their senses upon this great work. So let's talk a little bit about anything you've recently published or have in the works that listeners should check out. So what are you working on, Barna?
Sure. So actually on September 14th, I have a novel coming out. It's going to be called Fatal Pose. And I guess if I were to give a log line pitch to filmmaker, I would say, imagine Columbo meets Pumping Iron.
Okay. That sounds like a non sequitur, but in your hands, sounds like it could work. Please explain.
It's that open mystery style of a murder mystery, where you know who the killer is in the beginning, and you're interested in how the sleuth is going to solve the crime. So it's a murder mystery that takes place in the world of professional bodybuilding in Southern California. So my hero is a private detective who's an ex-bodybuilder, and he's investigating a murder, and he's carrying on this game of cat and mouse with the person he suspects of being a killer. So that's the film. Wishful thinking, maybe.
I was going to say, have you optioned the film rights yet?
If anyone's listening, your people and my people can do lunch. We can.
There you go.
We can discuss it.
Don't call us; we'll call you, right?
Right.
Oh, but that's in the works.
Yes, that will be released on September 14th, and I have, over the last 2 years, I had two other novels. So those are science fiction thrillers that were also released. So, in a way, these books kind of came from my own Peter Bogdanovich moment, where for a long time I was thinking it's nice going and analyzing and writing about other people's creative work, like how he started out as a film journalist and film scholar. So
that's right, yeah.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So I said, hey, I want to tell my stories the same way.
Yeah, that's awesome. It's interesting. 6 degrees of separation from Peter Bogdanovich there. So. All right, well, we'll check those out. And you have classes resuming, I take it, later this month?
Yes, actually in a couple of weeks. We're hopefully, knock on wood, everything's going to be going back to normal, teaching in classrooms. So keeping our fingers crossed and thinking good thoughts.
Absolutely right. We'll continue to stay safe and healthy. And Barna, thanks so much for appearing on Cineversary again.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. This was fantastic talking about great films that we both love. This was really outstanding. Thank you.
A lot of fun catching up with Barna and rhapsodizing about one of our favorite flicks from the 1970s. Here's hoping that The Last Picture Show also ranks high on your list. Instead of cluttering up our podcast with advertisements, we've decided to ask our listeners for their support. We could use your help to offset the costs to produce Cineversary, which includes expenses like podcast hosting provider fees. If you'd like to make a monetary contribution to the Cineversary podcast in any amount, large or small, we've made it safe and simple by partnering with PayPal to collect the funds. Simply visit tinyurl.com, that's tinyurl.com/donate Cineversary, and click on the Donate button. Any major credit card is accepted, and the entire transaction is handled securely and confidentially by PayPal. Or if you're familiar with PayPal, you can simply send us a payment in any amount you want to cineversegroup@gmail.com, and that's spelled CINEVERSE group@gmail.com. We really appreciate your generosity. Also, I'd love to hear what you think of our Cineversary podcast. You can email me suggestions or comments at cineversegroup@gmail.com. And I encourage you to visit cineversegroup.com, the portal for my film discussion group that I launched in 2005, where you can hear podcast recordings of our group discussions and read more about the movies we study. Still here? Well, that's likely because you're not only a faithful fan of the show, which of course I appreciate, but you're also itching to learn what's planned for next month. In September, we are going to explore a dark neo-noir psychological thriller that, for many, defies explanation and remains one of the most thought-provoking and puzzling pictures ever made. It's my personal favorite film of the last 2 decades, and it's celebrating a 20th birthday this fall, none other than David Lynch's Mulholland Drive. Until then, this has been your humble host, Eric Martin, reminding you to butter up that popcorn, live a big screen surround sound life, and cherish those classic movies because they're not getting older, they're getting picture showier. You know what I mean. Thanks again for listening.